Because of their dirty. Wait, why is them? No, okay. Okay. Good evening. Today's topic, I wanted to speak about Corporate Service Providers Act of 2024. Then I realized because the budget was released recently, that's on the 18th of this month, I felt that I should touch upon the budget before I go into the Corporate Service Providers Act. With that in mind, I would like to speak about the Singapore budget in the beginning, and then I'll move into the Corporate Service Providers Act. When I was talking about the Singapore budget, Honorable Prime Minister, who is also the Finance Minister, has unveiled the budget on 18th of this month. This is a SG60 budget. Budget is to face all the individuals are worried about losing jobs and also cost of living. The government has addressed all those things. The unemployment in Singapore is only 2%. And my feeling is the unemployment in Singapore is only due to the structural unemployment. What do you mean by structural employment? Because the technology is changing, and also AI has come in now, artificial intelligence, robotic automation have also moved in. So always structural change in jobs, requirement, expectations. So the 2% is, when compared to the most of the countries in the world, is nothing. I feel it is a full employment in Singapore, because there's always a need for more staff, because more foreigners are coming to Singapore, establishing their operations, being the tax-friendly nation in the world. When you come to the GDP performance of this year is 4.4%, which is much more than expected by the government and by the public. If you look at the budget, the funds required to meet the expenses is $123 billion. They forecasted 6.8 billion surplus in this current year's budget. And during the year 2025, they expect 6.4 billion surplus for this year. And for 2025, they expect 6.8 billion surplus is expected. Why the government feels there will be a surplus in the budget is that the corporate tax collection is exceeding than what they have forecasted and expected. There will be a good surplus during the current year of 2024, and they foresee that it will also happen in 2025. Among the tax collections, corporate tax leads the total collection, followed by goods and service tax. Why there is an increase in the goods and service tax is that in the past, you know about it, the goods and service tax was 7% before, and during the year 2023 and 2024, they have increased 1% respectively. Now today, you're paying 9% GST, goods and service tax. So the goods and service tax have overtaken the personal income tax collections. So the major contributor to the budget is companies, corporate tax, followed by goods and service tax and income tax. The rest of the other taxes are there, stamp duty, COE, what they collect, and all those things are there, but they don't contribute to the extent what these three main tax collections are. If you look at the expenses for a government, mainly it is in defense, health, and education. The ratio of expenses, you can go in the same order also. So they are the major expenses for the government, leads to a budget surplus of $6.4 billion this year. If you look at the OECD countries, I always used to look into what is the tax collection towards the GDP. OECD countries, the tax collection to the GDP, there are more than 140 countries who are members of the OECD. I feel that there are more than 195 countries in the world, of which more than 140 are members of OECD. The tax to GDP, tax collection to GDP happens to be 33.9% for OECD countries on an average. The highest being Japan, which is 34%. You can immediately start wondering why Japan is GDP to tax collection is 34%. It is due to Japan, Canada, Australia, Korea, US, India, they tax global income. And secondly, the tax rate is also much higher than most of the countries in the world, resulting in 33.9% of tax to GDP. If you look at Singapore, which is a tax-friendly nation, the tax to GDP is 12.1%. Now I touch upon in the budget, I touch upon about the individual benefits given to Singaporeans to overcome the cost of living. The individuals have been given packages as part of SG60. Every individual Singaporean that gets CDC vouchers and also gifts for SG60, baby gifts to support large families, mid-career reskilling benefits are all given during the year, which starts from the next month, goes on until January 2026. The second biggest benefit what has been given to individual is that 60% rebate on the personal income tax rate for the year of assessment 2025, which is kept at $200 per person. The next one is about the CPF contribution rate for older workers aged 60 to 65 has increased by 1.5%. You know pretty well, below the age of 55, the CPF contribution is 37%, which is 20% deduction and 17% contribution from the employer. For the age between 60 to 65, the total contribution is 34%, including the 1.5% increase, which I'm talking now, is both employer is 16% and employee is 18%. The workers in the age gap of 65 to 70, the total CPF contribution is 25%, which is 12.5 and 12.5 respectively. Now, I move on to, there is not much to talk about on the individual side, which I'm also more concerned with what is the advantages given in the budget to the business community. I move on to that section. There is a 50% rebate given on corporate income tax for the year of assessment 25, restricted to $40,000. When I started seeing this benefit, I started thinking that they continue to provide the small and medium-sized companies in order to plow back the profits and to grow. The previous benefit which they were offering continued to be there. That is, for the first 10,000, 7,500 is not subject to tax. Next $190,000 of profit made, they only tax 50% of the income. So in fact, subsequent to that, on the tax payable, on the tax amount payable, you get 50% rebate or capped at $40,000. The same benefit was offered to all the corporate taxpayers during the year 2024, year of assessment 2024. Singapore also to study potential deployment of nuclear power as a major investment, which is badly needed, which happen to be a clean energy. So they have allocated $5 billion in the budget. Another $5 billion have been set aside for the Coastal and Flood Protection Fund. And one more $5 billion was set aside for the promotion of the airport, which is including Terminal 5, which is going for expansion. MAS also has set up an equities market review group to improve listing of companies in Singapore. Now I'll touch upon that and talk to you about a few things on this before you understand what is the meaning of the new equities market review group. There are a lot of stock exchanges in the world. The biggest stock exchange in the world is New York Stock Exchange, followed by Shanghai Stock Exchange. Then you have got India has got a big stock exchange, followed by Japan, Hong Kong, and UK. when these countries have got big stock exchange and there is a lot of activities and turnover is going on, Singapore being the third largest financial center in the world, fourth largest forex center in the world, being financial activities are happening in a big scale, roughly $4.7 trillion of assets under management. But the activities concerned with stock exchange is not as active when compared to the most of the exchanges I was talking to you. In order to boost the activities in the stock exchange, the government felt that they should appoint a review committee. So the MAS has set up the Equities Market Review Group. They have come out, the committee is still working on various other ways of activating and improving the listing of companies in Singapore and to have more trading activities to happen in Singapore. It is happening in other countries. The review group has come out with one suggestion which has been immediately picked up in the budget and they have included in the budget. When I go into the next page, I will brief you about what are the changes, what are the recommendations made by the review group, which has been totally accepted by the government. When I go to the next slide, I will talk to you about it. To support innovation, business will need to have steady flow of capital for research and development for future growth. So an amount of 1 billion has been set aside for private credit growth fund. The extension of double tax deduction for internalization means if you spend $10,000, you can claim $20,000 in claiming your tax eligibilities. So it has been extended until 31st December 2030. The next one is in order to promote small and medium enterprise to get the loans from banks. The Enterprise Singapore the government was guaranteeing all these loans. And usually these loans are given to them for a period of 5 years, ranging from minimum, if you look for 300,000, you can go to the bank, and some of the banks are involved in that, where they were offering you from 300,000 to $5 million, which now they have extended to $10 million loan, repayable over a period of 5 years. It's a good news for all small and medium enterprises which are needing for working capital to expand and to go internalize their operations. This is the one which the market review committee has recommended. What they have recommended is that for listing of new companies from other parts of the world, they are recommending them at listing 20% rebate on the corporate tax with a cap of $6 million. That means if you earn $30 million of tax payable, you get a 20% tax rebate, which amounts to $6 million. But provided that the company's capitalization is $1 billion. If you ask me, there are more than 750 companies listed in the Singapore Stock Exchange, out of which more than the top 100 to 150 companies are billion-dollar companies. So they are looking for new investees to come with $1 billion capital to enjoy the benefit of $6 million tax rebate, which they will enjoy. The scheme is available until 2027. If it is a small company, less than $1 billion capital, they would, and if it is listed in the secondary market, they would like to offer $3 million tax benefit, which is also restricted to 10% on the total earnings, where $30 million, if you make a profit, then you get a 10% rebate amounting to $3 million. The next one they are looking for is fund managers to also list their companies in Singapore. So they will also enjoy a 5% concessionary tax rate on the qualifying income. Only thing is the fund management company has to be listed and to be in the stock exchange for a minimum period of 5 years. And the fund managers have to have, they have not announced what is the AUM which they are looking for. And also the scheme is open until 31st December 2028. The basic conditions which are there already to get a tax exemption is that the fund management company should distribute a certain portion of the profits or dividend, which they have not announced yet, have minimum professionals employed, that is investment professionals, to carry out trading, research and activities to be engaged in that, and portfolio management. So they will announce all this information shortly, which you have to go and look into. When they are going to allow them to fund managers to operate, enjoy the tax benefit, they are expecting them to put 30% of the assets under management to be listed, to be invested in the local stock exchange. I'm going to conclude about the budget. Before I conclude, the 2 points which come into my mind in the budget. One is about property developers will be very happy. There is no additional cooling measures in this budget. I now want to touch upon, say, a few things on this point. Because the property market, property price is skyrocketing. The government felt that we should put people who are buying properties and flipping over and making money. In the past, the government has come out with restrictions. They come out with ABST, whereby additional buyer's stamp duty was introduced. The stamp duty was increased from 4 to 6%. Subsequently, the additional buyer's stamp duty, beyond the 6% stamp duty, the additional buyer's stamp duty is payable by Singaporeans also for the purchase of a second property or third property, which is also payable by permanent resident. If it is a first property, second and third, the percentage will go up. If a foreigner or a company is going to buy a property, the additional buyer's stamp duty is 60%, which was 30% before. They increased to 60%. Then you can start thinking how much of percentage of properties in these years the foreigners are buying in Singapore. It has now come down to 5%. So out of the various properties sold, 5% of the properties are purchased by the foreigners, either through in their personal names or through companies, and paying 60% additional buyer stamp duty for the purpose of getting a residential property in Singapore. It doesn't apply to non-residential properties, the additional buyer stamp duty. Recently, the Singapore government has joined with the Malaysian government for the development of Johor. There are 5 or 6 areas in the Johor district has been identified to promote Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. The Singapore government has not announced any incentive in this budget. We foresee that which may be forthcoming in future. The Malaysian authorities have announced the tax concession. Certainly they will do it because whoever is going to set up the company, the taxation will come under the Malaysian jurisdiction and under the Malaysian tax authorities. Now I move into the Corporate Service Providers Act. Why the Corporate Service Providers Act was enacted and what was the reason for that to come? You know pretty well, Singapore, a lot of foreigners want to set up their operations. When they wanted to set up the operations, they want to engage in various activities globally. Most of the companies engage in transshipment in the sense goods doesn't come to Singapore. They want to enjoy the infrastructure, enjoy the tax-friendly nation and all the other benefits which Singapore can provide them. When Singapore was chosen by most of the people to set up their operations, it also brings with a lot of money laundering activities, financing of terrorism activities, and also proliferation. Proliferation means manufacturing of weapons for destructive nature. So OECD countries have come out with various regulations to avoid money laundering, countering financing of terrorism, and also stopping the proliferation funding. With that in mind, OECD has come out with a lot of rules and regulation for the member countries. I told you earlier, 140 member countries are there to follow. Singapore is also a member of the OECD. So Singapore started with OECD regulation and also wanted to have, has come out with Ethics 100 and Ethics 200, which all the accountants are well aware. When I talk about Ethics 100 and 200, what is the difference? Is that Ethics 100 talks about code of professional conduct, and Ethics 100 was issued by the Council of the Society of Accountants on 25th of November 2015 on all ISICA members, that's all public accountants members have to follow. EP 200 provides the anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism, proliferation requirements, and guidelines issued to all accountants in Singapore. So when the Corporate Service Provider Act was enacted, I will tell you what was the reason and the purpose of the Act. The purpose of the Act is to regulate corporate service providers and qualified individuals who provide or supervise the provision of the corporate services and to improve the requirements is person to detect, prevent money laundering, proliferation financing, and terrorism financing. Before that, I want to give you an understanding. There are more than 3,000 corporate service providing companies in Singapore. And recently, the government has come out with 13 to 14 foreigners have money laundered more than $3 billion. 13 of them have been arrested. 13 of them have been punished. They have served sentences between 10 to 12 months. After servicing them, the government has banned them and then deported them to overseas countries. And then what has happened also, there are a lot of money laundering cases have been detected when some of the corporate service providers started acting as resident directors or nominee directors for foreigners. And also, some of them has operated banking account for these people, not only be the resident director, also operated the bank account, also was involved in the money laundering cases. They have been charged and sentenced for their offenses. And some of them, unfortunately, also has acted as nominee directors or resident directors for more than 980 firms. So, and also a guy who is a Grab driver was nominee director or resident director for 60 companies, filed to exercise due diligence on his companies, and one of the company's bank account was misused by a foreigner, and $171,200 of proceeds of scam were handled, and he was fined in court for his being the resident director of the company. Now, another Singapore resident director who happened to be the resident director for 185 companies was also among one of the 13 people I was talking about involved in money laundering issues. After seeing all these things, the Companies Act doesn't restrict the number of companies a person can be a resident director. So the new Corporate Service Providers Act doesn't talk about the number of companies a person can act, or there are no restrictions have come in. Probably the guidelines may come in future, because what has happened is the Corporate Service Providers Act has been passed in Parliament. The minister has not announced the date on which it will come into force. I foresee that the Corporate Service Providers Act may come into force anytime after it has been gazetted. They may say that it will come into force from 1st of September or maybe from 1st of January 2026. Anyway, I would like to go through the Act, which has been passed already in Parliament, so that you are aware, understand the rules and regulation, and be prepared to take up the foreigners who are going to be the clients of all these corporate service providers. The corporate service providers, I've told you what is the reason for the purpose of the Act. And then under the Act, there are only 48 sections under the Act. What is happening is that 46 sections under the Act. The section talks very clearly about what is considered as corporate services, and also what is the purpose for which the Act has been enacted. Very clearly said that to prevent money laundering, proliferation financing, and terrorism financing to avoid, and also registrar has been appointed. The duties of the registrars has been very clearly defined. The corporate services, what are considered as corporate services, has been defined, which I'm going to explain to you at later transparencies. And also who is eligible to be registered, who has to register, all these things are there, which I'm going to follow. Before I go move into that, I want to tell you a briefing also about something more about a new act which has been enacted, which is very close to what you are talking about, Corporate Service Providers Act, where the intention is to detect and prevent money laundering, countering financing of terrorism and proliferation. Now, coming to the name of the act is Precious and Semi-Precious Stones Act, wherein which uh, those people who want to deal in precious and semi-precious stones should also get a license from Ministry of Law, so that the money laundering activities is restricted, monitored. Under the precious and semi-precious stone, if you are going to deal with anyone for cash for more than $20,000, it's the duty of the not it is the duty of the precious, semi-precious stones, the company which has obtained a license from the Ministry of Law, is to report to the suspicious transaction reporting office. The act is also very specifically say, if you make 2 to 3 invoices for the same person which total up to $20,000, still the violation has taken place, you have to report to the suspicious transaction reporting office. The act also prescribes that you have to do KYC norms for all these companies. The act also talks about IPPC, internal policy procedure code. Every precious and semi-precious stone company should have a IPCC guidelines made out for their companies, and they are also expected to train the staff of monitoring the customers who has to undergo the KYC requirements, take all the particulars of the customer who is coming into the shop to buy, also do the KYC for them. If it is a red flag case, red flag has been defined under the OECD, 40 different type of activity action take place. It's considered as red flag. They have defined what are the 40 different type of red flag activities may happen when you deal with a customer. So in that situation, you have to be more careful. The customer due diligence has to be extended to quite often customer due diligence has to be done. Upon doing customer due diligence, you have to decide whether to accept a customer or not. When you come to the Corporate Service Provider Act, I'll go through the rest of the act. You can understand what are the rules and regulations which have come in to enable you to understand the act better. Under the act, I told you the registrar has been appointed. He has got all the powers to inspect, come in to inspect to any Corporate Service Providers Act. Presently, the license is issued by the ACRA because there is no act was there before. If anyone want to do their corporate services, you write an examination with the ACRA, and then upon passing the examination, prior to passing the examination, you have to attend a course which is for Ethic 200, which I was talking to you earlier. After attending the class for 4 hours, you understand all the OECD regulations, and then also understand all the prevention of money laundering, detection of financing of terrorism, and also proliferation activities. So you will be in a position to understand and then do the job. So under IPPC code, which each precious, semi-precious stone company should maintain, also trains the staff before they be onboarded. And then even the staff themselves have to do the KYC, so that you are not taking a staff who doesn't have clean records. Subsequently, the training has to continue on a yearly basis to see that the customers are being monitored on a regular basis. The same thing also applies under the Corporate Service Providers Act. Now, the registrar who has been appointed under the Corporate Service Act, his duty is to maintain a register of corporate service providers That means the companies which are providing the corporate services, like the registration given by ACRA, there will be a registration process, and then there will be a certificate issued under the Corporate Service Act by the registrar. Then it also has got a register of registered qualified individuals. Also in ACRA, you have qualified agent, who are the individuals who got license for the company, and they in turn will appoint their staff to carry out the corporate filing for various clients of the corporate service provider. They are called authorized staff to carry out the job. That's a present situation. In future also, the same type of regulation and authorization will be issued under the Corporate Service Providers Act. But what is mind-boggling is that if you look at the corporate services definition, which I'm going to show it to you shortly, you can understand any service you provide will fall into the corporate service provision. What are corporate services? If you are going to form a company on behalf of another person or a legal person, acting or arranging any one of that is like providing them a corporate resident director, a secretary, or a corporation, or providing them a partner for a partnership, or providing a registered office, business address, correspondence address, or administrative address, or other related service to your corporation, partnership, or legal person. Then acting or arranging for another person to act as a nominee shareholder also, or carrying out designated activities. I'll come into that, what is designated activities, to the provision of any accounting services. Even accounting services fall into corporate servicing. Why accounting services bring into? Because if a company's books you are going to write, if any money laundering activity is going to come into that, you should have a suspicion to understand the entries you are going to post, and then if necessary to make a suspicious transaction reporting. Same thing when you do electronic transactions on behalf of another person, you are authorized to operate a bank account on behalf of a customer. So when your foreign client requests you to do a particular transaction in the bank, you should be allowed to understand the transaction which is going to happen. If you are suspicious of that transaction, to make a suspicious transaction report to the office. Now I go into, now I have clearly defined, I have not defined, the Act has defined clearly what all corporate service says. Designated activities. Okay. The designated activities also come into the definition of corporate services. Okay. If a guy doesn't do corporate services but do designated activities, he is considered as deemed corporate service provider. Means he is also supposed to register under this Act. It's like buying and selling of real estate. Okay. You can ask me, there is a real estate agency, an agent has to obtain, if you act as a property agent, you have to obtain a license under the Property Agency Act. A license is issued to you. But an accountant or a corporate service provider is going to act behalf of a foreigner or a local person to buying and selling of real estate, then you are considered as a person doing a designated activity. Same case if you manage client's money, securities or others. Security means if a client gives you $100,000 and say, please buy and sell shares on my behalf. A management of bank account, savings account, and also securities account, as I was talking about. Organization of contribution for creation, operation, or management of corporation. That means you manage the affairs for a company, which may be owned by foreigner or owned by a local person. Creation, operation, management of legal person or legal arrangement, buying and selling of entities. Means if somebody comes to you and say, I want to buy a restaurant, you assist him to buy a restaurant, which is also buying and selling of a business entity. All these activities comes under designated activity. Now, I come into, like, when the license was issued under ACRA, it is issued to a filing agent and then qualified individual. Okay. So now this qualified individual is also defined here. An individual is a fit and proper person successfully completed the prescribed course of training. Okay, that's what I was telling you, 400 hours of training on EPIC 200, which talks about all money laundering and all those things. The individual license is not cancelled, suspended, restricted, or paid a fine of $25,000 for contravention or censured by the registrar. What this license is not cancelled, suspended, or restricted. That means if your license is cancelled, you cannot go and ask for a license as an individual. Now, the situation is when I was talking about fit and proper person, what do you mean by fit and proper person? See, if you look at a person who is a bankrupt, he's not a fit and proper person. If a person is below the age of 18, he's not a fit and proper person. If a person has been sent to imprisonment, so various act talks about imprisonment, the length of imprisonment, which prohibits them to take up the directorship or take up or apply, eligible to apply for a license. So they have not come out with the terms and conditions for that. Upon enacting the act, the terms and conditions will follow. But today we can understand a fit and proper person is a person who is not bankrupt, who is not below the age of 18, who has not been imprisoned. Deemed registered qualified individual. Here I want to tell you, the corporate service provider is already there, or you can set up a company and want to provide corporate services. If an accountant who has got a license to only to practice and give assurance, audit certificates, or carry out taxation doesn't need a certificate, but usually the accountants carry out the taxation activities also. So when you are licensed to issue assurance, audit, carry out an assurance and audit, and then give the audit report, you are licensed by ACRA, doesn't give you permission to do the corporate secretariat activities. So you become, if you start doing any of the corporate services or you do the designated activities, which I was explaining to you earlier, you become a deemed registered qualified individual. The same case, a corporate service provider whose job is to provide all these resident director, administrative office, secretary, register office, all those things. If he's going to engage in a designated activity, the company becomes a deemed corporate service provider. So the definition is very clear. If you do corporate service activities, you go and apply for a license, you become a registered corporate service provider. If you do any designated activities, you become deemed corporate service provider. The same case for individual, happens to be an accountant, start doing a corporate services, he becomes a deemed individual. An individual applies for a corporate service license, becomes a qualified individual. Okay, qualified individual, deemed qualified individual. Qualified corporate service provider, deemed corporate service provider. The deemed comes in when you're going to do a designated activity which has been defined, which I have explained to you earlier. Now, if you want to register as a corporate service provider, you can be an individual, register the business in your name as a sole proprietor, or you are a company, or you are a limited liability partnership or a limited partnership. You have to make an application and pay the prescribed fee, and then you can apply for your license. And I explained to you already, deemed registered corporate service provider means an account entity is trying to get a license to provide corporate service activities. Now I move to prevention of money laundering and financing of terrorism. That's the intention of the act is the same as I was telling you. Precious and semi-precious stones act was enacted for that purpose. This are also done for the same purpose. So a corporate service provider has to do KYC norms before start providing any corporate services. With a registered corporate provider, reason to suspect money laundering, proliferation, financing, or terrorism financing, where the registered corporate provider has reason to doubt the adequacy of information obtained or under any circumstances, provider must not proceed to provide corporate services. That means you have to be cautious. Otherwise, you'll be penalized under the Corporate Services Act. Penalty is very high. I will come back to you on the penalties. In the future presentation. Providing false information to the registrar, materially false, omit to provide the information, intentionally alters, suppresses, or destroys any documentation or information, shall be guilty of an offense, shall be liable upon conviction, fine not exceeding or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. So penalty is very high. And providing corporate services without registration is $50,000 penalty. Means even you come under the deemed corporate service provider or deemed individual for doing the designated activities, you will be fined 50,000 for not having registered with the registrar under the Corporate Service Providers Act. So under Section 7(4), we will be penalized, convicted, either imprisonment or $50,000 of fine. Now they also define what is nominee director and nominee shareholder. I have not taken the nominee shareholder. You are all aware when you represent someone else as a shareholder, you become a nominee shareholder. That's the reason why today you file the beneficial owner to the Register of Companies that you own the shares on your name and it's for you, and you are not holding on behalf of somebody, which is disclosing of the beneficial ownership. So the definition of nominee shareholder, nominee director is where you are appointed on behalf of somebody else. Okay. Now I come to the point. If you look at the Companies Act says that one person should be a resident director. Foreigners cannot. There you will have 10 foreigners to start a company, but one should be a resident director. So the section says resident director, but doesn't define what is the duties and responsibilities. The resident director's duties and responsibilities is the same like any other director, foreign directors. So the duties and responsibilities of any director is defined very clearly. It doesn't differentiate between a foreign director or a resident director in the Companies Act. Here, under the Corporate Services Act, they define nominee director. Nominee director is usually a resident director which is provided to set up a company in Singapore, which is the requirement under the Companies Act. If you look at 100% shares can be held by a foreigner or an overseas company or a local company. When it comes to the board of directors, one should be a resident director. Now we move on to the next one. Just a moment, please. I'm waiting for the transparency. The next one. Now, I think I don't have any more slides, but I will tell you a few more points which I would like to tell about the corporate service providers one before I conclude and go into the question and answer section. So no person can carry on the business as corporate service provider without registration, which is a basic requirement because of the introduction of the new act. Providing false information is punishable, and the customer's due diligence has to be done by the corporate service provider. And if he is not satisfied, he should decline, terminate, or make a disclosure, record the basis of doing that, and also carry out any other prescribed procedures, or his duty is to report to suspicious transaction reporting office. Providing a corporate services without registration carries a penalty of 50,000 or 2 years of imprisonment, which is in the Act. I do not have anything else to say, to add on this. I'm happy to take questions from you. If you have any questions to ask me, if you find it difficult to ask me over the Zoom, you can also send it by in the box, chat box. I'm happy to take up your questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Any questions? I've opened up the audio, so you are feel free to ask. If not, you can put the questions on the. You can field the questions to me. The question has come. Are there any qualification prescribed to be appointed as a nominee director? The section talks about fit and proper person. Again, I explained to you who is a fit and proper person. It doesn't say any qualification for a person other than fit and proper person, where I was talking about, I think Companies Act talks about 21 years of age to be eligible for a director. He is not disqualified due to bankruptcy. He doesn't have debts of more than 100,000. The judgment has been obtained, and he's not imprisonment. Are there any qualification prescribed to be a corporate service provider? Presently, the corporate service provider undergoes the 4.5 hours lecture about the ethics 200. The same thing will be there in future. The section doesn't talk about any qualification. You have to pass the examination, pay the prescribed fee. You are a fit and proper person. Again, the same fit and proper person comes back to the scene. Does the cash grant of Singapore dollar 2,000 still applicable to those companies? The section doesn't talk about cash grant. Nowhere the section of the 46 sections doesn't talk about the cash grant. Oh, budget. Okay. Oh, it's a please. I still my mind is understood. Yes, you should have one staff employed in the company. Then you are eligible to get the $2,000 cash grant. If you don't have, you still enjoy the 40,000. If you have one staff employed during the financial year 2024, the same rule which was there in 24 is being repeated now. So if you have one staff, you are eligible for a cash grant of 2,000. Are there any restriction on number of companies in which a person can be a nominee director? Fantastic questions. It's not in the section. The minister may, after approving and introducing this act, will come and say, we feel a person cannot handle more than 150 companies. He may come out with a circular or a notification in the Gazette. So till today, even the act has not come into force. They have not announced the restriction on the number of companies a person can act as a nominee director. I'm waiting for the next question. There is no restriction as on today. I only said that 150. Don't mistake me. 150 regulation has come. The minister may come with that restriction. That's what I was saying. Okay, don't quote me wrong. I'm a bit worried. Any more questions? Any more questions coming? Can I conclude? I'm happy to wait for 1 or 2 minutes for you to think and put up the question. You should put budget or then say Payment Services Act, sorry, Corporate Services Act. So then I can understand the question is on this act or in that other, on the budget or on the act. How do you think? Oh, okay. There are two questions have come. I will read it out and give you the answer. How will Accra monitor and enforce compliance with these obligations? Although the registrar has got wide powers. The registrar has to maintain two register. The register of corporate providers, register of registered individuals. He has got powers to inspect the places and then do the job. So Accra has got a lot of enforcement activities and they can monitor very well. And then they also, even in the present act, Accra has come to check a lot of corporate service providers to find out what are the compliance they have done for the KYC for foreigners. They have done the inspection and they have also, when I was talking about the Precious and Semi-Precious Stone Act, Ministry of Law has also gone to various jewelry shops to check whether they maintain their IPPC, internal policy process and process code, whether they follow the KYC requirements of keeping all the documents of those buyers from the shop. Next question is, how do you think this act affect small service providers? I don't feel it's only a compliance requirements. I don't feel it will affect small service providers. They can set up and carry out. Only thing is the compliance is going to come. If you are not going to be compliant of that, the penalties are heavier. Are there any exemptions to the mandatory registration with Accra for certain entity or services? Oh, see, you do mandatory requirement under the various act that will continue. Accra, sorry, the Corporate Service Act doesn't talk about the specific industries and the registration required. It doesn't talk about. It only regulates a corporate service provider. What are considered as corporate service? What are the duties and responsibilities of a corporate service provider? Who are considered as corporate provider or deemed corporate service provider? And then for violation, what are the penalties? So whatever the regulations and permission which presently Accra is asking you to do, you have to continue to do. There is, what are the specific disclosure requirements for nominee directors and shareholders regarding their nominators? It's not in this, it is nowhere in the section. It doesn't talk about any disclosure requirement. Upon the act come into force, they may come out with the regulations. In the regulations, they may ask you to file an annual return to say how many companies you act as a director, nominee director. I mean, which the system can pick up in Accra itself. You don't have to file a return, or they may ask you to file a return. I do not know, but the monitoring will be there. Can one corporate service provider be a co-partner with another corporate service provider? Okay. See, you have to take, if the company takes corporate service license, so both companies will have corporate service license. So if you are an individual corporate, if you are an approved individual in one company, automatically you also become an approved corporate service provider in the other company. So individual. So I don't feel you will have an issue on that. Okay. Now, I thought you are going to ask me a very interesting question, which it was in my mind. I'll tell you that question before I go into the next question. Do a part-time bookkeeper needs a corporate service license? Because accounting services is also considered as corporate service, right? Now you think, for you it is maybe a part-time job, but you are writing the books of a company. So when you are writing the books of the company, if you come across a money laundering transaction, a part-time bookkeeper also has to get a corporate service license, because if the Registrar of the Corporate Service Act is going to punish you, why you have not taken a license, you are in trouble. So even part-time bookkeepers, if they are going to write some books of companies, should also get a corporate service provider's license. Now I come into the question. A lot of questions are coming. Fantastic. What are the changes my clients of corporate secretary provider need to implement to align with the new regulation? They have you have to do KYC only. That's what they are talking about. Before you onboard them and set up companies for them in Singapore. The Act doesn't talk about anything else. New regulation, we do not know. The application form may come in to file to get the license. New license will be issued under the Act, because presently the ACRA is issuing the license. So prior to the expiry, or all of them may be requested to submit a new application. So they have to tell us the administrative modality. Based on that, you follow. I don't foresee any additional requirement. They may come under the Act, but the Act doesn't talk about any new regulations are there. What is the onus of responsibility of an external accountant outsourced for bookkeeping, but not acting as a corporate service provider for a company, in case the accountant finds suspicious transaction? Hello, first he has to be I was telling you just now, I'm answering to the question of Bhavna, where she has asked, if he's a part-time and you come across a suspicious transaction, you can report to suspicious transaction office. They in turn come back and say, if the new act is enacted already, you are violated. So if you are going to be a part-time accountant, when the act is coming to force, immediately apply for a license. And then if you see a suspicious transaction, report to the suspicious transaction office. If you come across today, you don't have to worry, because you don't come under the act has not come into force as on today. If they say the act come into force from 1st of September, if this happens after 1st of September, you are in trouble. How can corporate secretary providers stay informed about future amendments or update to the act? He has to have a lifelong learning. You have to keep on reading what are the changes happening in the act, and apply and get all the permissions, look into all the regulation. It's your duty. So ignorance of law, there's no excuse. What is the process and timeline for existing service providers to comply with the new registration requirement? See what happens once when the minister announced in the budget, announced in the Gazette that the act will come into force. Then they will tell you all the guidelines of which you have to follow. So all the existing corporate service providers have to start following those guidelines to fulfill the expectations of the new act. I'm waiting for the next question. What is the process and timeline for existing service providers to comply with the new? I told you already. The minister has to come with the notification to say when the act will come into force. Subsequently, he will also give you the guideline, or the act, the registrar will write to all the existing corporate service providers to say what is the process and the system you have to follow, which they will give you in advance, so you can comply with. I don't feel it will be a difficulty. Okay, I go to the next question. Come from Daniel. What are the key anti-money laundering, countering and finance of terrorism and countering proliferation financing obligation that registered individuals must adhere to. No, this section very clearly says even present, you do the KYC first. And if it's a politically, once you do the KYC, and then you start understanding the client, no, you go to open a bank account, what the bank is asking, where you're going to buy, where you're going to sell, what is the amount of purchases, volume of purchases you'll be doing, what is the volume of sales you are going to do, how much money is going to come in, how much money is going to go out. They want to assess your genuine business transaction and to differentiate between your money laundering transaction. The same way you, as a corporate service provider, has to come out with your KYC questionnaire has got all this information inside. So if you get all the KYC information prior to onboarding a client, I don't feel you will be in trouble. What's the next question? Am I answering fast? If no other question is there, thank you all. Even if you have still questions, don't worry, you can always knock at my door and get the answers for that. Thank you for all of you for listening to me peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.